I don't know what to call that moment, a shock, a knife, or a silence so sharp it hurt. I only remember this. When my headlights swept over them, the light landed on a sight that froze my breath. In the thick snow, where the road had been whipped white by the wind, a gaunt shape lay motionless. A female Doberman, bones showing, her black coat sodden and plastered to her skin. Her front legs stretched out as if she'd given up. Her belly was pressed hard against the cold road. Her breathing was a thin, fragile rasp, like smoke. Before I fully registered it, the light showed me another detail that tightened my chest. 4 tiny lumps, no bigger than fists, were curled close to her belly. They trembled in time with her breath, their small bodies half buried in snow, damp fur, ears still folded, eyes not yet open. They made no sound. There was only the wind and the engine. That silence was worse than crying, as if they'd learned from the first moment of life that screaming was useless. I could see the sharp outline of her shoulder blades, ribs raised under stretched skin. She looked like a breathing ghost, but her eyes, my God, her eyes, they were open, fixed on the light, not begging, not hopeful, just a quiet waiting, as if asking me, "Will you walk away like everyone else?" A hard gust slapped the snow over her body. Ice clung to the wound on her belly, to the thin, purple toes. I watched her flinch as the wind hit, but she made no sound. She curled closer, gathering whatever warmth she had left to shield those 4 fragile lives beneath her. My hands clenched the wheel. My head spun. Inside the cab, the heater blew warm air against my face, but my whole body felt frozen. I heard my heart racing, mixed with the howl outside. One voice in my head urged, "Go!" "Don't stop. You've got bills. Your mother's hospital fees. Your future." But a louder voice answered, "If you leave, that look will haunt you forever." I leaned over the wheel, eyes glued to that sight. No other cars stopped. No one saw. Just me, her, and those 4 tiny lives. The sky was a blank white. The road swallowed sound. The silence pressed so hard it was suffocating. I watched her chest rise and fall, quick and weak. One pup shifted, trembled like it might stop. In that instant, I knew, if I hit the gas and left by sunrise, there would be 5 cold bodies in the snow. And I would never rid myself of this image. I closed my eyes. The past slammed into me. A memory from 12 years ago, when my sister shivered cold, lips blue, gasping in a car that had died. I thought I'd lost her forever, until a stranger stopped. A man who had no reason to help us did. I opened my eyes. The scene in front of me was the same, only now I was the one behind the wheel. I had to choose. I understood then. If I didn't stop, I would lose whatever little humanity I had left. I exhaled and, with shaking hands, shifted into gear. I kept my eyes on those dim, waiting eyes. 5:12 a.m. Time ticked like an invisible countdown. I clenched my teeth. Then I lifted my foot off the gas and slammed the brakes. The car swerved onto the shoulder, tires crushing the brittle ice into a spray of glassy shards. I killed the engine and opened the door. The wind hit me like needles, snow driving into my clothes, into my hair, into my skin. But I felt nothing but the pounding of my heart and the sight before me. I stepped out. My flashlight swept across the curled form in the snow. The Doberman blinked. The 4 little ones still moved weakly, buried in cold. I dropped to my knees, hand trembling as I reached out. In the scream of the wind, I heard my own voice, small and raw, promise them, Wait. Don't go. I won't leave you. I shone the flashlight down. Snow fell in thick sheets, blanketing that gaunt shape. My heart thudded, part from the cold, part from something darker. The fear I'd arrived too late. I crouched, knees digging into the hard snow. The cold cut through my jeans, down to the bone. Her cloudy eyes stayed fixed on me. No fight, no hope. Only silence. Only waiting. I held my hand out, fingers trembling, angling the beam to show her body clearly. Her skin was scarred, fur clumped off in patches. Her belly sucked in so hard the ribs stood out. A heavy breath escaped, thin as smoke in the white air. I heard a faint moan. I couldn't tell if it came from her or the tiny lives pressed beneath her. I leaned closer, and then I saw them. 4 pups, palm-sized, for wet and packed with ice. One lay nearly still, its body rigid. The biggest trembled, making a thin, wind-like squeal. All 4 were pressed to their mother, hunting for the last heat on this exhausted frame. My chest tightened. I swallowed hard. The same voice I'd heard before cut through my head. If you leave, by morning there'll be 5 frozen bodies in the snow, and you'll be the only one who knows. I placed my palm on the snow beside them. The mother flinched, bracing her shaky legs. She didn't growl, didn't snap. She simply stared at me as if asking, "What will you do with us?" I whispered, voice raw from the wind. "I'm not here to hurt you. I won't abandon you." At that, she seemed to relax a hair, as if the last thread of tension let go. She had no strength left to resist, only the fragile hope that this hand wouldn't disappear like all the others. I kicked off my heavy coat and laid it on the snow. Cold stabbed through immediately, but I didn't care. I bent, scooped up the first pup, a tiny, shivering ember warm in my palms. I wrapped it in the lining and pressed it to my chest. My heart hammered, sending heat through wool and cotton. Then the second. Then the third. I lifted each one, tucking them carefully into my jacket, curling them close. When I bent for the last, the mother made a hoarse little noise. Her eyes blinked. I paused and met her gaze. "I'm not taking them away from you. I'm helping. I swear." Only then did she roll enough to show the last one, the smallest, limp. Breathing so faint, I had to put my ear to feel it. Holding it felt like cupping a wet blade of grass, ready to wilt. I tightened the jacket strap. My stomach dropped. I didn't know if I'd gotten there in time. I only knew this: they would not die alone. I turned to the mother. I meant to lift her, but when my hand slid under her belly, I froze. She felt almost weightless, terrifyingly light for a full-grown dog. Her whole body trembled. Her legs tried to stand, then buckled, then tried again. I heard myself whisper, "Come on. They need you. I need you." And somehow she found the strength. Wobbly, weak. She leaned her weight against me like a promise placed in a stranger's hands. I clutched the pups inside my coat with one arm and supported that bony body with the other. The wind screamed. Snow whipped my face. All I registered was the faint pulse beneath my palm and the featherweight weight I carried. Back at the car, I opened the passenger door and spread my coat across the seat. I laid the pups down and eased their mother up. She made a low sound, let her head drop, and her eyes half closed. I shut the door and slid into the driver's seat. Warm light filled the cabin. 5 lives lay there, barely breathing. In the hush of the car, I heard my own voice, rough and steady. No one made me stop. But if not me, then who? I shifted the gear and turned the wheel, not toward the weather station, I picked another road. No guaranteed end, but it led at least to hope. The cabin was so quiet I could hear each faint breath behind me. The wind howled outside, muffled by the thick glass, but it couldn't stop the cold that crept straight into my chest. I gripped the wheel, eyes fixed on the white road ahead, while my mind spun between past and present. The dash clock blinked 5:27. Each minute felt like a blade cutting into memory. I knew I should have been near the weather station by now. If I didn't get the system rebooted in time, the contract would slip away. And with it, the only money that could keep my mother in the hospital. For years, I'd been running against time, against those cold numbers on medical bills. In one breath, I turned the car and left it all behind. I glanced at the rear view. 4 pups huddled under my coat, bodies shivering in small waves. The smallest barely moved. Their mother, Nala, the name forming in my head as if by right, lay still, eyes half closed, chest hollow and fragile. I knew, with a certainty that tightened my gut, that without help they wouldn't see the dawn. I pressed my lips together. The scene in front of me blurred into a memory I'd buried for 12 years. I was 17 then. My sister and I were lost on a forest trail when the blizzard rolled in early. The car died. No signal on the phone. I left her in the car with the family dog and walked for help. When I came back, half the car was buried. I opened the door and found her curled up, lips blue, breathing shallow. The dog lay pressed against her, shivering but still trying to warm her. I thought it was over, until a light cut through the storm. A stranger. No ties to us, no reason to stop. He pulled my sister and the dog out of the white. I can still see his face in that dim light. Ordinary. Nothing special except the choice not to leave. My sister once whispered, "If he hadn't stopped, I wouldn't be here." I've heard that sentence 1,000 times in my head. Never did I think I'd be the one standing where he stood, the one who had to choose between driving on and staying. I swallowed the lump in my throat. The road ahead twisted. Snow made the tires slip sideways in the drifts. I fought the wheel, clenched my jaw to hold the car straight. But deeper down, what really made my hands shake wasn't the cold. It was the fear of the memory repeating. The fear that if I left these lives, their faces would haunt me like a wound that never healed. Headlights cut through the rows of trees. Snow on the branches fell in sheets like ash. I tried to watch the road, but every thin breath behind me yanked me back into the present. I didn't dare turn on the radio. Any sound other than their breathing felt like betrayal. I whispered, almost for myself, "No one forced me to stop. No contract pays for this. But if I don't do it, who will?" The words hovered in the dim car cabin, small, heavy as lead. I thought of my mother, lying in a white hospital room, hollow-eyed, weak. I forced a smile when I walked in. I had promised her I would not let her worry. I would take the weight. I'd prepared to trade everything for that promise. And now, in this blizzard, I was ready to trade the only contract I had, all for the look of a dog, and 4 lives that hadn't even opened their eyes to the world. I exhaled and tightened my grip. Outside, wind screamed through the mountain gaps. Snow lashed the windshield. Inside, a choice had already formed, clear and irreversible. I would not turn back. I had chosen this path. When I checked the rear view again, Nala's eyes opened a fraction. Tired, alert. She looked at me not as a stranger. She did not plead. She only confirmed one thing. This time, someone had stopped. I turned onto the narrow, muddy lane, snow piled thick like a white blanket. The headlights swept across dark, old trunks. Darkness pressed in on both sides. My palms were slick with sweat, though the cabin was freezing. I knew exactly what I was doing. Leaving a job, leaving money, leaving the promise to my mother. But I also knew that if I turned back, I would be leaving 5 lives gasping behind me. One name kept surfacing in my head. Eliza Boone. The woman I hadn't dared call in over 5 years. A former military vet. A doctor who had saved more than pets. She'd pulled soldiers back from the edge on the battlefield. Once a friend, then a painful memory. I had no other choice. The car stuttered to a stop before a dilapidated wooden garage buried in the trees. I honked 3 times. The horn was swallowed by the storm. No answer. I bit my lip and opened the door. Wind hit like knives. Snow sliced into my face. I went around back and opened the passenger door. My coat shivered with the movement. The 4 pups lay nearly buried in one another, breathing shallow. Nala lifted her head weakly. Her cloudy eyes slid over me. I knocked again, harder. The garage door squealed open. Eliza stood there in the yellow light, hair wild, eyes still sharp as ever. No greeting, no questions. I could only get out 2 words. I need... She saw Nala, the litter tucked inside my jacket, and asked nothing more. She pointed at a metal table near an old sink. I put them down. In an instant, Eliza became someone else. Gloves on. A heater clicked. Warm towels spread out. A medical bag flung open. I stood frozen, hearing my heart pound while her hands moved with the clean, precise urgency of someone who had spent a life-saving breath by breath. 3 are responsive. 1's critical. Her voice was brief, without hesitation. She pointed at the smallest pup, nearly motionless. I could not see its chest rising. My voice came out raw. Does it have a chance? Eliza didn't answer in words. She fitted a tiny resuscitation tube into the pup's nose and began compressions with fingers no thicker than a match. Press release. Press. The rhythm was exact, each motion buying an extra second of life. I wanted to look away, but couldn't. I could not turn my back on that tiny body fighting for its first breaths, perhaps its last. I heard myself whisper, God, don't let me be too late. Nala lay close, eyes fixed on Eliza as if she understood everything. Now and then she made a hoarse sound, tried to lift her head, then sank back. I dropped to my knees beside her and set my hand on her heavy, tired head. Come on, Mama. Trust us. You're not alone anymore. In that moment, I felt how fragile we all were. Eliza, me, the 5 fragile lives on that metal table. We were all staking everything, standing on the thin line between loss and hope. Eliza looked up. A bead of sweat rolled down her temple. Then, faint as a thread, I heard it. A breath. Tiny and real. The smallest pup shivered and its chest lifted, faint but rising. I nearly shouted. It's breathing! Eliza only nodded, her face taut. We're not out of it yet. But it came back. I sank to the floor, hands over my face. For the first time in years, I trembled, not from cold, but from relief and horror and the knowledge that I had just witnessed the most fragile thing there is. Life pulled back from the edge. Eliza kept bent over the metal table, hands moving without pause. I stood there, heart still pounding from the tiny breath that had returned in the smallest pup. Relief hadn't even had time to settle before something else slid in, quieter, colder than the blizzard outside. Eliza flipped Nala onto her back and ran her gloved hand along the bare patch of skin, then stopped. Her brow tightened. "Logan," she murmured. "Surgical scar." Very recent, I leaned in. Beneath the thin skin, a neat row of stitches showed, threads not yet dissolved. I felt the words leave me before I meant to say them. "You mean someone cut her?" Eliza nodded. "Not an accident. This was professional. They removed the ID chip." The garage felt colder by a degree or 10. A thought slid across my mind like a stone. Someone hadn't just abandoned her. Someone wanted her gone. Eliza flipped on a UV light and swept it over Nala's body. The purple glow picked out the thin fur. Then it showed itself. A faded circle, half erased, half scarred into the skin. Eliza straightened, eyes dark. "Son of a... I saw this symbol in the service. It's the mark of a K9 breeding facility. Military contracts. The dogs that don't make the cut." She let the sentence hang. I didn't need the rest. I understood. I slid back, my spine hitting the cold wood wall. A new question clanged in my head. Had I just rescued a family, or stumbled into something people wanted buried forever? My phone buzzed in my pocket. An unknown number lit the screen. I hesitated, then answered. A man's voice, low and flat, said only, "Leave the dog, or you'll be the next to disappear." The line went dead before I could even think. Outside, the wind picked up, keening harder. I walked to the window. Through the frost-blurred glass, I saw fresh tire tracks in the snow. Not mine. Wide, deep, still wet. Someone had been here. Might still be. I swallowed. Eliza had seen it all. Her face had shifted from the friend I'd known into the old soldier. Alert, tight, ready. "Logan," she said softly, "we're not just saving dogs. We're opening a door a lot of people want nailed shut." I looked down at the table. 4 pups are tucked in warm cloth, 1 sleeping, 3 stirring. And Nala, those tired eyes fixed on me. No pleading, no accusation, only a single question. "Will you leave us again?" My fist tightened. I already knew the answer, even though it would change my life. Out there, the dark was no longer just wind and snow. It had shape. It had wheels. It had someone waiting. And for the first time, I understood. This fight wasn't only to keep 5 small lives breathing. It was to keep my own humanity from being swallowed by the dark. That night I stepped onto the garage porch, trash bag in hand, my head a storm of questions without answers. Snow fell heavily. Wind screamed through the black trees like a frozen choir. I thought I'd take only a few steps before turning back, but the moment my boot sank into the hard snow, I heard it. The crunch of packed ice. A footstep. Not mine. I froze. Breath caught in my throat. Around me, only white. The weak yellow beam from the garage spilled a narrow slice of light. Slowly I turned, heart pounding. And then it lunged. A shadow. Tall, wrapped in a heavy coat, face masked. In his hand, steel flashed under the porch light. Instinct made me stumble back, but my heel hit the stone step. I went down hard. My skull cracked against the trash bin's rim. The world blurred, storm white flooding my vision. He said nothing. No demand, no threat. Only the cold silence of someone sent to erase. The blade lifted. I scrambled, hands clawing for anything to fight with. And then, sound tore the night. A snarl. The garage door burst open. Another shadow flew out, lean but fierce. Nala. She shot through the snow like a black bullet. body coiled, launching sideways into him. The impact thundered across the ground. The knife spun free, glinting, before burying itself in the base of a tree. He screamed when her jaws sank deep into his arm. Blood sprayed, bright against the snow. I stared, dazed, as the dog who had once lain dying in the drifts became a storm of muscle and fury, fighting not for herself, but for me. I staggered upright, hand seizing the wooden rod propped against the porch. I charged, but he lashed out first, boot slamming into Nala's ribs. The thud was sharp, brutal. She yelped, staggered, then snarled again, refusing to back down. He scrambled to his feet, but instead of reclaiming the knife, he stepped back. His eyes flickered with something I hadn't expected, fear. Then he turned, vanishing into the storm, leaving only deep tracks and a trail of red. I dropped to my knees beside Nala. Her body trembled, the stranger's blood still wet on her muzzle. Her eyes lifted to mine. Not afraid, not defensive, only trusting. My hand pressed to her head, my voice unsteady. "Thank you. Not for saving me, but for staying." The wind kept screaming through the pines. The dark beyond hadn't lifted. I knew this wasn't the end. We had only brushed against a truth far larger, far more dangerous. But there, in that fleeting moment on blood-stained snow, I understood one thing. I wasn't alone anymore. The next morning, the sun crept shyly over the ice-clad pines. Pale light seeped into the old wooden cabin, laying a faint gold across cold corners. I sat in a worn armchair, a mug of hot coffee in my hands, listening to the fire snap inside the stove. The room no longer felt empty. It breathed with small sounds, the tap of claws on the floorboards, the soft whimpers of pups, the weary but peaceful sigh of Nala. The 4 little ones lay curled in a box lined with towels. Their skin carried a faint blush again, their eyes still shut, but their breaths steadier. The smallest, the one I thought would never survive, still trembled lightly, but its tiny tail flicked weakly when I touched it. I named him Ben. Not because the name was special, but because I wanted him to have one, because he would not remain nameless anymore. Nala lay close to the fire, front paws crossed, tired eyes fixed on the cabin door. I had washed the blood away and bandaged the bruised side where the boot had landed. She never fought me, never cried out. She only let me do it, then rested her head and exhaled. But her ears still twitched with every shift of the wind outside. Even exhausted, she kept watch for us. I stood and opened the door. Morning air rushed in, sharp with pine and melting snow. Under the porch, the footprints from the night before remained, deep, urgent, leading into the dark forest. I didn't follow them. I didn't call the police. I knew this wasn't a story that could end with a single phone call. There were secrets larger than us. But I also knew that if Nala hadn't hurled herself out into the storm, I wouldn't be standing here to see this light. I turned back. The pups stirred in their box. Nala's gaze caught mine. No longer resignation, no longer silent. Only connection. She saw me, and I saw her. I smiled, an expression I hadn't remembered how to make in years. I sat beside her, stroked her scarred head, and whispered, "I thought I saved you. But maybe you're the one who saved me." Last night I lost a contract. I lost money. Maybe I lost the future I'd been clinging to. But this morning, listening to the fragile, steady breaths of 5 small lives, I realized I hadn't lost everything. I'd reclaimed the part of my heart that had been frozen for so long. My mother once told me, "Not all angels have wings." I never understood, until I looked at Nala. Her legs trembled, her body was thin, scarred. But she shielded, she fought, she chose to stay. I glanced at the pups curled in the box, then out at the snowbound forest. I knew the darkness wasn't finished. I knew someone was still waiting. But I also knew that when I stepped outside this cabin door again, I wouldn't walk alone. Because sometimes, angels don't fall from the sky. They come on 4 shaking legs and scarred bodies with eyes that never stop watching you, even in the dark. If you've stayed with me to this very end, I want you to take a deep breath and remember Nala's eyes in that storm. No cries, no pleas, only silent waiting. And sometimes all of us are faced with a moment like that, a moment that forces us to choose, walk on or stop. I stopped, and because of that, 5 lives still breathe today. But the truth is, they saved me too, saved me from the numbness, from the frozen part of my heart. I believe you've had a moment like that, when you saw an abandoned animal or heard a faint cry in the dark, and you had to decide. So I want to ask you, have you ever stopped to save a dog, a cat, or any living soul? What was your story? Share it in the comments below. I promise I'll read every line, because each small story can be the light that leads someone else. And if today's journey touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share this video, because with just one click, this story might reach someone who needs a reason to stop, a reason to choose compassion instead of turning away. We can't save them all. But every time we stop, every time we choose love over indifference, the world grows a little less cold. Thank you for being here, for listening, for standing with me as an angel without wings walked into my life. And who knows, maybe one day you'll meet a pair of eyes waiting for you in the dark. Don't turn away. Stop. Because sometimes a single decision can change an entire world.